August 1945. The Pacific War reaches a boiling point as the United States prepares a weapon of unprecedented cosmic power.
The target selection was cold and clinical, prioritizing cities with specific geography to maximize the lethal shockwave's destructive reach.
Truman faced a choice between 1 million American casualties in a land invasion or the release of the nuclear sun.
The secret of the bomb and the secret of the balloon are one and the same: the power of the hidden truth.
At Los Alamos, the gadget had already proven its terrifying efficiency, turning the New Mexico desert sand into green glass. Engineers labored in secret, assembling the uranium core of Little Boy, a device that would forever alter human history's trajectory.
On Tinian Island, the 509th Composite Group prepared the Enola Gay, a modified silverbird destined for a dark legacy.
The logistics were a nightmare, transporting the volatile components across the ocean while dodging Japanese submarine patrols in deep waters.
Meteorological teams analyzed the skies over Japan, searching for the perfect clear day to ensure a visual drop on target. Deep state interests within the military-industrial complex viewed the atomic strike as a necessary laboratory test for future global control. As the crews boarded their planes, the silence on the airfield was heavy, with the weight of a dying old world. The mission was more than tactical. It was an experiment in fear, designed to break the Japanese spirit without an invasion.
The sun never sets on Project Sunshine, because its legacy is written in the very bones of everyone watching this.
High-altitude winds over the Japanese mainland were unpredictable, adding a layer of lethal uncertainty to the Enola Gay's long flight.
President Bill Clinton established the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to finally face the nation's dark scientific past.
In 2026, the legacy of these experiments lives on in the strict international protocols governing bioethics and nuclear research.
Every detail was scrutinized by the interim committee, ensuring the moral responsibility was shared among the highest levels of power.
The B-29 vibrated with the roar of 4 Wright Cyclone engines, carrying the hopes and horrors of the entire Western world.
They remind us that the reign of ruin promised by Truman can never be contained once it is unleashed upon the world.
Tensions between the scientists and the military peaked as the final arming sequence was initiated during the long flight north. This was the birth of the atomic age, a moment where technology outpaced morality, leaving the future in a permanent shadow. Strategic bombing had already leveled Tokyo, but Hiroshima had been intentionally spared to measure the atomic bomb's singular, devastating impact.
Orders were absolute. Visual identification of the target was mandatory, or the mission would be aborted to the secondary site.
Hiroshima's air raid sirens had fallen silent, the city believing the small group of planes posed no significant or immediate threat.
At 08:15 local time, the shackles holding Little Boy released, and the aircraft lurched upward as 5 tons dropped away.
For 4 to 3 seconds, the bomb fell through the morning air, a silent messenger of the end of the Second World War. Then, the world turned white as the first nuclear weapon used in combat ignited. Chapter 2: The Second Sun.
Within 1 microsecond of detonation, the core reached 60 million degrees Celsius, creating a thermal flash that vaporized everything. The pressure wave expanded at supersonic speeds, leveling reinforced concrete buildings like they were made of fragile playing cards.
In the epicenter, survivors were left blinded and skinless, wandering.
Tokyo's high command remained in denial, as communication lines to Hiroshima were severed in a single, terrifying instant. General Anami argued that the Americans likely had only one such weapon, urging the cabinet to continue the suicidal resistance. Meanwhile, back on Tinian, the second assembly team began prepping Fat Man, a much more complex plutonium core implosion device. Unlike the uranium bomb, Fat Man required a perfect simultaneous detonation of high explosives to crush the plutonium core inward. The air over Japan was filled with radioactive black rain, a toxic mixture of soot and fallout that poisoned the survivors. American propaganda flyers were dropped across other cities, warning of a reign of ruin if the emperor did not surrender immediately.
The Soviet Union, sensing the end, officially declared war on Japan, launching a massive invasion of Manchuria to seize territory. This dual pressure, atomic destruction and Russian invasion, created a schism within the Japanese government that could not be healed. Kokura was the primary target for the second strike, but thick smoke from previous firebombing runs obscured the visual drop zone.
With fuel running dangerously low, the crew made a fateful decision to pivot toward the secondary target, the city of Nagasaki. Nagasaki was a city of hills and valleys, a topography that would both focus and contain the coming nuclear fury.
At 11:02 a.m., the second sun ignited over the Urakami Valley, proving that the United States possessed an assembly line of doom.
The Fat Man explosion was significantly more powerful than Hiroshima, yet the hills shielded parts of the city from total ruin.
Thousands of Catholic civilians at the Urakami Cathedral were vaporized during morning mass, a tragic irony in a war of ideologies.
The decision was made to endure the unendurable, a phrase that would signal the first time the Japanese people heard his voice.
Even as the surrender was being drafted, some military hardliners attempted a coup to seize the recorded message and continue fighting.
The coup failed, and the recording was smuggled out of the palace in a laundry basket, a humble vessel for history.
Scientists on the ground in Hiroshima began documenting the atomic sickness, the first clinical observations of acute radiation poisoning.
The U.S. Navy began its final approach to Tokyo Bay for the formal surrender ceremony, aboard the USS Missouri.
Critics argue the second bomb was unnecessary, a redundant act of violence meant to test the more complex plutonium design.
The reality was a blur of tactical necessity and political posturing as the world moved into the shadow of the Cold War. Truman's diary revealed a man burdened by his choice, yet convinced that it saved millions of lives on both sides.
The Pacific War ended not with a bang, but with a signature on a deck, surrounded by the might of the U.S. Navy.
Yet the radiation remained, a silent killer that would haunt the survivors, known as Hibakusha, for decades to come. Nagasaki's destruction was the final exclamation point on the bloodiest conflict in human history, marking a terrifying new beginning.
The weapons were gone, but the knowledge of how to build them was out of the bottle, and the genie would never return.
While the world celebrated the Nagasaki strike, a third plutonium core was already being prepared for shipment from Los Alamos.
Documents declassified decades later reveal that General Groves was pushing for a continuous atomic bombardment until total Japanese collapse.
The Demon Core, as it would later be known, was intended for a mid-August drop if the Emperor remained silent.
Truman's public stance was decisive, but privately, he began to fear the military was moving faster than his political control. Intelligence intercepts suggested the Japanese military was planning a national suicide defense, rendering even 2 bombs insufficient for victory. To ensure the third strike's impact, planners considered dropping it directly onto the Imperial Palace to decapitate the Japanese leadership. This decapitation strike was a controversial strategy that risked turning the Japanese population into an unstoppable, vengeful insurgency.
Deep state actors within the Manhattan Project viewed Tokyo as the ultimate laboratory for urban nuclear destruction dynamics.
On August 13th, the Third Corps was held at the last minute by a direct, frantic order from the President's office.
Had the shipment proceeded, the third sun would have risen over Tokyo before the historic surrender broadcast could ever occur. The existence of the third bomb was a closely guarded secret, used as a psychological lever during the final negotiations. Even after the war, the Demon Corps claimed its first victims during criticality experiments, as if cursed by its unused purpose.
Some historians argue that the threat of a third bomb was the only reason the Japanese hardliners finally backed down.
The logistics for a sustained nuclear campaign were already in place, with production lines ready to yield 12 bombs monthly.
The Cold War logic was already manifesting. The third bomb wasn't just for Japan, but a warning to Stalin's advancing Red Army. Hidden archives suggest that a site in northern Japan was also considered, to block Soviet influence from seizing the Hokkaido island. This was the dawn of nuclear diplomacy, where the mere possession of a secret weapon dictated the new global borders.
The scientists who built the Third Corps lived in a state of moral suspension, waiting for an order that never came.
Truman finally realized that the power of the atom was too absolute to be left in the hands of the military alone.
The third bomb remains a ghost of history, a reminder of how close the world came to total, unbridled nuclear escalation. As the Missouri surrender proceeded, the Third Corps was quietly returned to the desert, its lethal potential mothballed for the future. But the shadow of that third strike laid the groundwork for the modern doctrine of mutually assured destruction. What would have happened if the Demon Corps had reached Tokyo? The history of Asia would have been written in ash.
The secrecy surrounding the third bomb fueled decades of distrust between the civilian government and the burgeoning intelligence community.
Even today, certain files regarding the August 1945 nuclear schedule remain classified under national security exemptions. The psychological trauma of the hidden bomb influenced Japanese pop culture, birthing monsters born from the fear of the unseen. The transition from war to the nuclear peace was a tightrope walk over an abyss of total extinction. We were one signature away from a third sun, a fact that remains one of the most chilling what-ifs of history.
To understand the Cold War, one must first understand the bomb that was built, but never dropped.
The echoes of the Demon Corps still vibrate in the halls of power, where the threat of the third bomb never truly died.
While the world feared the American monopoly on the atom, a quiet physicist was already dismantling it from within.
Having flew Nazi Germany, Fuchs found refuge in Britain, eventually gaining access to the most classified nuclear secrets of the century. When he arrived at Los Alamos, Fuchs was placed at the very heart of the plutonium implosion research team.
He didn't just see the bomb, he understood its soul, calculating the precise dynamics of the Fat Man's explosive lenses.
Fuchs believed that a nuclear monopoly by a single power would lead to global tyranny, justifying his betrayal as a quest for balance. His primary contact was Raymond, a Soviet courier who met him in quiet corners of Santa Fe to exchange death in a briefcase.
Fuchs delivered the complete blueprints of the Fat Man device, including the exact dimensions of the plutonium core.
These were not just sketches. They were the mathematical keys to the kingdom that Stalin's scientists desperately lacked.
Beria was paranoid, using Fuchs' data to cross-reference other spy reports to ensure the Americans weren't feeding them disinformation. Just months after Nagasaki, Stalin received a complete technical manual on how to assemble a working plutonium bomb. This intelligence shortcut saved the Soviet Union years of research and billions of rubles in failed experimental trials. The FBI remained oblivious until the Venona project began deciphering encrypted Soviet cables from the war years. Codenamed REST, Fuchs was identified through a series of mathematical errors in the cables that only he could have made.
When MI5 finally interrogated him in London, Fuchs confessed with a disturbing sense of moral superiority and intellectual detachment.
He claimed he was a communist in his heart, but a scientist in his brain, a duality that baffled his captors.
His arrest sent shockwaves through the West, triggering the era of McCarthyism and the hunt for the Red Menace in academia. Fallout from the Fuchs case directly led to the execution of the Rosenbergs, though Fuchs himself received only 14 years.
The secret of the bomb was no longer a secret. It was a global contagion that could not be quarantined.
Deep state analysts argue that Fuchs was allowed to operate to ensure a balance of terror that prevented a US-Soviet hot war.
Fuchs eventually moved to East Germany, where he was treated as a hero of the socialist state until his death.
His legacy is the RDS-1, the first Soviet bomb, which was a near-perfect carbon copy of the American Fat Man.
The atomic spy proved that in the age of information, a single mind can be more powerful than an entire army.
Today, the ghost of Fuchs haunts every high-tech lab, where the line between collaboration and espionage remains razor-thin. We live in the world Klaus Fuchs helped build, a world where peace is maintained only by the threat of total destruction. The Fat Man didn't just fall on Nagasaki. It fell on the concept of national security.
The trial of Klaus Fuchs was the end of the beginning.
If we shift the entrance by 2 meters, the flow improves significantly.
I agree. That balances the structure perfectly.
I'll update the schematics now.
What if the greatest security breach in history wasn't a failure, but a calculated transfer of power?
Deep state theorists suggest that certain factions within the US government feared an American nuclear monopoly would prevent future military funding.
By allowing the Soviet Union to steal the bomb, these architects of shadow ensured a permanent state of global tension. Klaus Fuchs may have been a pawn, his escape with secrets facilitated by intelligence agencies to maintain a global status quo. This balance of terror provided the perfect justification for the birth of the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower would later warn against. Secret documents hint at the Shadow Council, a group that believed peace could only be maintained through the threat of total annihilation. If the US remained the sole nuclear power, the drive for technological advancement would stall, threatening the profits of defense contractors. The FBI's delay in arresting Fuchs, despite numerous red flags, points to a controlled leak designed to feed the Soviet machine. Some analysts argue that the Venona project was only revealed to the public once the desired strategic parity had been reached. This conspiracy of convenience turned the Cold War into a multi-trillion-dollar industry, fueling decades of proxy conflicts.
In this light, the atomic spies were not traitors to their country, but messengers for a high.
Evidence suggests that key technical hurdles for the Soviets were cleared by unidentified sources whenever their project hit a dead end. This theory posits that the Red Menace was a necessary ghost, a phantom used to keep the American public in a constant state of fear. The goal was a world of permanent war for permanent peace, a concept where the weapons are built to never be used.
Had Fuchs been stopped in 1945, the Soviet Union might have taken a decade longer to achieve.
But the shadow players couldn't wait. They needed an enemy to justify the expansion of the surveillance state.
The Fuchs case allowed for the implementation of extreme loyalty oaths and the purging of unreliable thinkers from high-tech sectors.
This created a deep state meritocracy, where only those willing to serve the weaponized status quo were allowed near the levers of power. The true legacy of the atomic spies isn't just the bomb, but the creation of an invisible government that operates above the law.
Even today, the controlled leak strategy is used to manage the rise of new superpowers and the distribution of advanced AI.
To the architects of balance, the lives lost in Hiroshima and Nagasaki were merely the opening move in a grand, global game.
They viewed human history as a series of controlled explosions, each one clearing the path for the next phase of control. The secrecy of the Manhattan Project provided the perfect blueprint for how to hide an entire shadow government in plain sight.
As we look back, the betrayal of Klaus Fuchs feels less like a crime and more like a pre-written script for the 20th century.
The atomic age wasn't born from a desire for peace.
By the late 1940s, the machinery was in place, the world was divided, the fear was real, and the profits were endless.
The Red Shadow was no accident. We are the inhabitants of a fortress built on secrets, where the guards and the prisoners are often controlled by the same hand.
The story of the bomb is the story of how we were convinced that our only safety lay in the tools of our destruction.
As the Cold War intensified, the truth about Fuchs and the Shadow Council was buried under layers of official mythology.
As the desert sands of New Mexico fused into glass,
In 1947, just 2 years after Nagasaki, a craft crashed near Roswell, sparking a cover-up that would last for 80 years. Military insiders claim the craft was not from Earth, but was attracted by the unique electromagnetic signature of nuclear detonations.
President Truman allegedly authorized the creation of Majestic 12, a top-secret committee to manage extraterrestrial biological entities and their tech.
The theory suggests that the push for advanced nuclear weapons was actually a cover for reverse engineering recovered alien propulsion systems.
By 1948, the line between nuclear physics and exotic physics began to blur within the deepest layers of the Pentagon.
The sudden leap in transistor technology and fiber optics coincided perfectly with the recovery of the Roswell wreckage.
Skeptics argue the Roswell incident was merely a crashed Project Mogul balloon, designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests in the stratosphere.
But Mogul doesn't explain the memory metal, or the sudden, absolute secrecy that descended over the 509th Bomb Group.
The 509th, the very unit that dropped the atomic bombs, was also the unit that initially reported the flying disc recovery.
Deep state whistleblowers suggest that the nuclear arms race was a front to hide the massive energy requirements of interdimensional portals.
If the public knew that free energy existed, the entire global oil and nuclear economy would collapse overnight. Majestic 12 operated with an above top-secret clearance, answerable to no president, funded by black budget operations.
The Groom Lake facility, or Area 51, was established as the primary site for testing aircraft derived from these visitors. Some argue the Soviet Union's quick nuclear success was due to their own recovery of a crashed craft in the Ural Mountains. This UFO Cold War was the true conflict of the 20th century, hidden beneath the theater of nuclear diplomacy. The 1952 Washington flyover forced the government to accelerate the disinformation campaign, labeling witnesses as delusional or hysterical. As the hydrogen bomb tests intensified in the Pacific, UFO sightings near naval task forces reached an all-time high.
Were they monitoring our progress? Or were they concerned that our nuclear toys were tearing the fabric of space-time?
The shadow government realized that to control the atom was to control the gateway to the stars, and they weren't sharing.
Every nuclear silo built since 1950 has a dead man's switch, designed to prevent interference from unidentified aerial phenomena.
This intervention theory posits that we are a quarantined planet, allowed to have the bomb, but not to take it into deep space.
Majestic 12 remains the ghost in the machine, the ultimate architect of the post-1945 world and its hidden technologies.
The atom was the bait, and we are the fish that bit the hook, unaware of the fishermen standing on the bank.
In the basement of the Smithsonian, crates of unidentified artifacts from 1947.
The secret space program was funded by the very fear generated by the nuclear arms race, a masterstroke of psychological warfare.
We were told we were racing the Russians, but we were actually racing to understand a power that was already here.
The Roswell radiance wasn't a fire, it was a beacon, and the world has been responding to it ever since. As we enter the quantum age of 2026, the secrets of MJ-12 are finally leaking through the cracks of the old world order.
While the public stared at the stars, the Pentagon was looking for a way to hear the sound of a Soviet atomic ghost.
Project Mogul was the ultimate invisible ear, using massive balloon trains to carry acoustic sensors into the stratosphere's sound channel. These sensors were designed to detect the low-frequency pressure waves of nuclear tests thousands of miles away in Siberia.
The materials used were cutting-edge, balsa wood, parchment, and high-tensile foil that seemed alien to local farmers and ranchers.
When Flight 4 crashed near Roswell in July 1947, the military faced a crisis: expose their spy program or allow a myth to grow. They chose the myth, realizing that flying saucers were a perfect smokescreen for highly classified, over-the-horizon surveillance technology.
The 509th Bomb Group was ordered to retract their flying disc statement, replacing it with the famous weather balloon cover story.
For decades, the Roswell incident served as a honeypot, attracting investigators while the true signals intelligence operations remained buried.
Project Mogul was so secret that even the FBI agents investigating the crash were denied access to the full technical specs.
To maintain the illusion, the Air Force launched Project Blue Book, a public-facing study designed to debunk UFO sightings scientifically.
In reality, Blue Book was a filter, separating genuine encounters with secret U.S. aircraft from civilian misidentifications and hoaxes. Development of the U-2 and later the SR-71 Blackbird accounted for over half of all UFO reports in the 1950s and 60s.
Pilots flying these secret birds at 70,000 feet were often mistaken for metallic discs by commercial pilots at much lower altitudes.
The CIA encouraged the little green men narrative, knowing that the public would stop looking for secret Soviet or American hardware.
This was the birth of weaponized disinformation, using folklore to protect the most sensitive military-industrial assets in the world.
Even the memory metal was likely a misunderstood alloy from the early research into flexible aerospace materials and radar-absorbent coatings. By the 1970s, the myth had become more powerful than the reality, a self-sustaining industry of conspiracy that obscured the nuclear truth.
Project Mogul was eventually declassified in 1994, but by then, the Roswell alien had already become a permanent fixture of global culture. The true horror wasn't an invasion from space, but the cold, calculated secrecy required to manage the threat of nuclear war. Intelligence agencies learned that a lie is most effective when it is more interesting than the boring, technical reality. As sensors improved, the need for Mogul-style balloons vanished, replaced by a global grid of seismic and satellite detectors.
The acoustic sound channel remains a vital part of global nuclear monitoring, a silent watcher of every blast on the planet.
Every time a country tests a weapon, the ghosts of Project Mogul are there to record the heartbeat of the explosion.
The Roswell cover-up proved that the government could successfully hide a massive, high-tech operation for nearly half a century.
This mastery of narrative is the foundation of the modern deep state, where the truth is hidden in a hall of mirrors.
We look for aliens because it's easier than facing the reality of our own capacity for self-annihilation.
The Mogul mirage continues to drift through our history, a silver ghost born from the fear of the atomic age.
In 2026, the sensors are better, but the stories remain the same, protecting the next generation of secret weapons. The secret of the bomb and the secret of the balloon are one and the same. The power of the hidden truth.
Look at this! I think we finally found it!
It's incredible. This changes everything.
And it matches the coordinates right here.
As the sky turned gray with the ash of 1,000 tests, a new, invisible
Project Sunshine was the Cold War's most macabre secret, a global operation to track the spread of strontium-90 in human populations. Strontium-90 mimics calcium. The body mistakes this radioactive poison for a nutrient, locking it forever into the skeleton.
Scientists realized that to understand the fallout's true reach, they needed samples from the most vulnerable, the young.
Codenamed Body Snatching for Science, agents were dispatched to hospitals to collect specimens from unsuspecting grieving families.
If anybody knows how to do a good job of body snatching, they will really be serving their country.
Over 1,500 samples were gathered from around the globe.
The data confirmed a terrifying reality. No one on Earth was safe from the fallout of the Pacific and Nevada test sites.
Deep state operatives used this data to calculate acceptable loss ratios for a potential full-scale nuclear exchange with the Soviets.
Project Sunshine was the ultimate expression of the nuclear priesthood. A group.
Secrecy was absolute. The Sunshine files were kept in a vault so deep that even congressional oversight couldn't reach them. In the UK, the Project Seagull variation involved testing the effects of radiation on unsuspecting coastal populations via aerosol releases. Human experiments were the dark twin of the space race, a race to see how much radiation a human could endure before total failure.
When the public finally learned pieces of the truth in the 1950s, the government pivoted to Operation Tea Party, a propaganda campaign.
They claimed the radiation levels were no more dangerous than a chest X-ray, knowingly ignoring the cumulative effects of internal isotopes.
The bone hunting continued into the 1960s, until the Limited Test Ban Treaty finally moved the fire underground. But the isotopes remain. Every person born after 1945 carries the signature of the atomic age in their very teeth. This nuclear signature is used by forensic scientists today to determine the age of unidentified remains, a permanent mark of our hubris. The shadow government realized that by poisoning the world, they had created a global dependency on their medical solutions. Was it a necessary evil to prevent a greater catastrophe, or a cold-blooded crime against humanity that was never punished? To this day, the full list of Sunshine participants and the location of the stored bone samples remains a Tier 1 state secret. The architects of the project retired with honors, their names etched in the history of science, while their victims remained nameless.
As we look toward the potential of nuclear conflicts in 2026, the lessons of Project Sunshine have been conveniently forgotten.
We are the atomic generation, a population shaped by the secret choices of men who played God in the Nevada desert. The fallout didn't just land on the ground, it settled in our DNA, a ticking clock for a future we didn't choose.
The bone hunters may have stopped, but their harvest continues to speak through the rising rates of rare cancers.
Truth is often stranger and more horrifying than fiction when the state decides that survival requires the sacrifice of the soul.
The sun never sets on Project Sunshine because it's
By the 1990s, the Cold War's iron grip on information began to rust, leaking the toxic secrets of Project Sunshine.
President Bill Clinton established the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to finally face the nation's dark scientific past.
Thousands of pages of classified memos were released, confirming that citizens were treated as expendable assets in the nuclear chess game.
The hearings revealed that the bone harvesting was only the tip of an iceberg that included injecting plutonium into hospital patients.
The government issued a formal apology, but for many, the atomic priesthood remained unpunished and protected.
In 2026, the legacy of these experiments lives on in the strict international protocols governing bioethics and nuclear research.
We now know that the balance of terror was built on a foundation of human suffering that crossed all national borders.
The Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs were the start of a chain reaction that didn't stop in 1945. It simply went underground. The deep state of the 1940s has evolved into the data state of 2026, where secrets are hidden in algorithms instead of vaults.
We must remember that the power of the atom is not just a weapon, but a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and flaws.
The bone hunters taught us that when we seek to control the forces of the universe, we often lose our humanity in the process. As we stand on the precipice of a new arms race involving AI and hypersonic delivery systems, the past is our only warning. The victims of Project Sunshine and the survivors of the August 1945 bombings share a silent, eternal bond. They remind us that the reign of ruin promised by Truman can never be contained once it is unleashed upon the world. Final insight: true power lies not in the capacity to destroy, but in the wisdom to keep the fire caged forever.
We are the stewards of a world that was almost lost. Our vigilance is the only shield against the return of the shadow.
KL Warfront. Subscribe and share your thoughts to explore the secrets of the battlefield with us.
Peace is not the absence of war, but the presence of the truth. Join us next time as we dig deeper into history.